we're going to be talking about an incredibly important event 40 years ago in 1977, which really represented the turning point in the fight against the Nazi National Front, who had become a real threat, well, across Britain, but certainly in London. We've got a fantastic panel today. Our first speaker will be John Lockwood. And John was living in Lewisham at the time. He was a newly qualified teacher. And rather shamefully, John was arrested and accused of assault on an unknown member of the Metropolitan Police and served 6 months in prison for fighting the Nazis in 1977. Our second speaker is going to be Harold Wilson, who was a young black youth who was a schoolboy of 13 in a comprehensive school in Creek Road, which was just up the road from where the events took place. Now, my understanding is that he wasn't allowed to go on the demonstration because his mum wouldn't let him, understandably. It was Brown Pants Saturday, really. But he's going to talk about the effect of the events on black youth in the area. The third speaker is going to be Paul Holborow, who was at that point the East London organiser of the Socialist Workers' Party, and the East London mobilised huge numbers of people to attend that demonstration. Our fourth speaker is going to be Weyman Bennett. Weyman, who probably people know now as the Joint Secretary of Stand Up to Racism. He was then a 12-year-old schoolboy living over in East London, and again, his mum was not going to let Weyman out on that Saturday, but he's compensated for it, obviously, since. I'm chairing the meeting. My name is Jan Nielsen. I'm a long-standing member, now living and active in Islington, but I too was a participant in the event. I was one of a very large number of students who all came suited, booted and equipped for the battle that was going to take place, along with a whole contingent. I mean, I can't remember, it was hundreds of students came from what was then North East London Polytechnic. Now, the speakers are going to speak for various bits of time. You don't need to worry about that. That's my problem. And then, hopefully, we'll have, about half an hour from the platform, and then we're going to open it up to contributions. You just put up your hand, and I'm going to try and choose a variety of people, and then I'm going to give people, each of the speakers, a couple of minutes at the end to come back. So the floor will be open to you. So with no further ado, let's welcome John. He doesn't.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay.
Okay, just start by saying that I was 26 and my mother didn't want me to go on the demonstration. I did get that. When we talk of Lewisham, August the 13th, 1977, we're really talking about a whole series of events that took place prior to that in the spring of that year and continued beyond it into the autumn and into the following year. And I would begin by referencing one particular anti-fascist mobilisation at Wood Green, which took an interesting turn of events. Instead of the normal course of ritual abuse between the two parallel lines of marchers passing through the town, instead of that normal course of events, from nowhere, a group of 14-year-old black lads appeared, grabbed shoes from the street and lashed them into the middle of the Nazis. And when I tell you that the fashion that year was for clogs, you will appreciate that the shoes bouncing off the Nazis' heads were attached to substantial planks of wood, and mayhem ensued. But about half an hour later, a second ambush was launched, possibly inspired by the first, using debris liberated from a building site, and this arrested the march for 10 minutes or so. As we travelled on the tube back to various parts of London, we realised that if we could increase the audacity of the challenge and substantially increase our numbers on the ground, then the next conflict would not just protest the Nazis, but physically stop them in the way that the Communist Party had famously and heroically led East London workers in 1936 at Cable Street. That was the objective. But we didn't know where this next conflict was going to take place. This was determined for us by Commander Randall of P Division, the Lewisham Police, who sent his officers with sledgehammers to smash the doors front and back of number 21 Childeric Road, the house of Faith and David Foster, and then to drag various young lads and one young girl out of the house in their underwear into the street before they were dragged off to Penge police station. Simultaneously, another dozen houses were breached in the same way. These youths were charged with conspiring with persons unknown at places unknown to commit crimes unknown in the metropolitan area. Something harking back to vagrancy laws from 1820 or some such time. A defence committee was immediately established, the Lewisham 21 defence campaign, and a demonstration was organised for that July. And as we formed up for that demonstration, we were attacked by 200 Nazis, armed, tooled-up Nazis, who caused us a lot of damage. People were hurt that day. There were several people quite badly hurt. When we fought back, our people were arrested. So the Lewisham 21 became the Lewisham 24. Now, at that point, the Nazis said, Lewisham is our focus for this year, and on August the 13th, we will march against black crime. So we were the chosen ones. We had the dubious honour of being the location for that planned next confrontation. Earlier that year, an organisation had been founded in Lewisham by the Trades Council called the All Lewisham Campaign Against Racism and Fascism, Al-Karaf. And for my sins, I was elected to that committee alongside another party comrade and alongside an IMG comrade. We had our work cut out. The first meeting, just as Lewisham was the focus for anti-fascist struggle in Britain, at the first meeting it was proposed that the word fascism should be removed from the term Al-Karaf, because in case it put people off. We managed to head that off, and immediately the Communist Party, who led the Trades Council and were dominant within this organisation, came back with the proposal that we should organise some kind of music in the other side of the borough when the Nazis marched, where poetry, music, various culture and prayers would be heard. And as the proposer said, and prayers will be heard, it was a vicar who leapt to his feet and said, oh, for goodness sake, what's the point of that? He was denounced and we were denounced for, deep entryism in the church. The Communist Party had no belief that it was possible to persuade people to confront the Nazis. And this is odd, because in Southall, the year before, in 76, a brutal murder had occurred. Gurjit Singh Shadar had been stabbed to death. And in the aftermath of that, John Kingsley Reid, a Nazi, had said, that's one down, 1 million to go. This was against the newly established Race Relations Act. He was charged, arrested and prosecuted, but the judge exonerated him and said, I wish you well in your project. He didn't make clear whether the project was the mass execution of Asians or merely building a fascist party, but he wished him well in his project. And this raised an interesting argument everywhere, because if the right to freedom of speech was absolute and inalienable, And at the same time, we have an absolute and inalienable freedom of people to walk the streets unmolested. And if those two absolute inalienable freedoms are, counterposed one to the other, then surely you have to simply determine which is the higher freedom. And any sane, rational person can only come to one conclusion. So the argument was eminently arguable, and we pitched ourselves into that battle. I have to say that we were unsuccessful in persuading the Communist Party to shift their position, and the final outcome of all this deliberation was that there would be a gathering in Ladywell Fields in the morning, which would then form into a demonstration and would march halfway to the Nazis up Long Pit Vale, and then it would disassemble itself and disperse the people. Now, we settled for that. We had no option, but we settled for that because we thought if we could mass leaflet the demonstration in the morning, which we did, and on Alcaraz 3 or 4 of us managed to distribute leaflets calling for people to stand with the black community up the road. If we could intervene heavily in the morning, we could persuade people to go on from that morning demonstration to gather at Clifton Rise. We were successful in this. The 5,000 people who'd been at Clifton Rise all morning were joined by, I think, 3,000–4,000 people, the vast majority of the morning demonstration. We had our audacity, we had our numbers, and on the day, people will know, and I'm sure people will fill in from the floor, on the day, at the clock tower, we fought the police for an hour. They failed to get through, the Nazis were stopped, and that year, if not that day, we turned the course of history.
Yeah.
Very good.
Amazing memories, doesn't it? Our second speaker now will be Paul Holborow, who I've introduced previously.
Comrades, before I start, I want to put on record my absolute admiration and tribute to John, who was central to the organisation of the Lewisham demonstration on that day, and had to pay a very heavy price as a young teacher. And I think it's interesting, John mentioned Cable Street, and if you don't mind me saying, John, I think it's right that you then got a job with a Communist Party head teacher who I believe had taken part in Cable Street. He hated the SW, or the International Socialists, the SWP as it then was, and Trotskyists, but he had the spirit of Cable Street to allow John to be re-employed in East London. And the other story I thought that John might tell is that when he was in Pentonville, and I think I'm right here, John, is that when he was in Pentonville, and the great Anti-Nazi League first carnival took place in Victoria Park, there was a demonstration inside Pentonville in solidarity with the Anti-Nazi League carnival of 80,000 people taking place in Victoria Park. So perhaps your time in jail must have been pretty horrific, but there were a number of bright spots there. As John said, the Battle of Lewisham was undoubtedly a turning point in the fight against the Nazis. And I vividly remember, as a young SWP organiser, we brought several hundred people down from East London. And I knew it was going to be an important day, because we had a very keen member, a guy called Steve Higgs, who I always was impressed with because he dressed as a real mod. Now, I have some talents, but let me tell you, dress sense is not one of them. But even I could recognise, here was a man who walked with fashion. So, we come out of New Cross Station, and the Nazis are assembling around New Cross, I think it was New Cross Gate actually, our great crowd of people were the other side, and there was a line of policemen separating us. Steve Higgs, in his flared jacket, flared whatever, trousers, platform, blah, 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 all that, walked out of our crowd, went right into the middle, on his own, picked up a brick and hurled it at the Nazis. And I hope it did extreme damage to them. I don't know what the impact was. And he just calmly walked back into the crowd, and the police jaws fell to the ground. But that gives you a feeling of the confidence that we had on that day. And then, on Clifton Rise, which is a sort of rise just above New Cross Gate Station, at 3 o'clock, the march emerged out of Clifton Rise, led by 6 mounted police horses, and then behind them there were the so-called honour guard of the Nazis. They had spears and bloody, sort of tipped poles holding Union Jacks. And they were strutting down. They thought they were the bee's knees, or perhaps as they would like to describe it, the master race. They turned into Clifton Rise and went down the slope. And that's where Jan and hundreds of other students, Andy Struthers there, we had a most ridiculous arrangement that Andy was going to raise an umbrella, we were all that completely fell apart. Andy always disputes this, but suddenly, and this was fantastic, the air was black with missiles. Fences were ripped up, gates ripped off their hinges, and I got it clearly in my head. You had the master race literally scuttling from door opening to door opening, ducking, terrified, betting things on the head and so on and so forth. And it was utterly fantastic, because this was the first time since Cable Street that we'd given the Nazis a bloody good hiding. And it was decisive. And one other little story that I'll tell you about the confidence of the day is that we had, you can imagine, we had endless stewards meeting, planning, all of which virtually were completely irrelevant. But one plan is that we would regroup at Ladywell British Rail Station in order to continue the demonstration if things went wrong. And the international organiser of the International Socialists then was somebody called Joanna Rollo. And when we got down to Lewisham High Street with the Nazis in chaos, but they were trying to regroup, Joanna shouted out over the megaphone, "To the station, to the station!" And she had misunderstood the message, and instead of going to the BR, the British Rail Station, went to Ladywell Police Station. And Ladywell Police Station was a very nice, demure Victorian building. And out of this building, you had, for the first time on mainland Britain, the police with riot shields, about 24 of them, in perfect formation. Joanna, with a megaphone in one hand and a banner in the other, was leading 4,000 demonstrators on the police station. The police took one look at us and they turned and ran back into the police station. Now, that gives you an idea of the confidence that this demonstration really produced. And it is important to remember that this was not a foregone conclusion. It wasn't easy to win this victory, because remember, John's mentioned Kingsley Reid, 1 down, 1 million to go in Blackburn, in Deptford, just up the road, in a parliamentary by-election. The combined Nazi vote was in excess of the person who won that by-election, 44% to 43%. There were factory branches of the Nazis in the post office in North London, in the Long Bridge, elsewhere in the post office, and so on. And I remember, previously in that year, the Nazis had won 119,000 votes, knocking the Liberals into 4th place in many constituencies, And it was on the basis of that that the Nazis could announce they were going to stand 318 candidates in the general election. Now, all that, you can go into that in terms of the discussion, but to mobilise for Lewisham was essential in terms of breaking the mystique that the Nazis were part of mainstream British politics. We shoved them to the side, and we established the principle, one, that they should have no platform, they should not be allowed to march, because they were the people who were going to use democracy to smash democracy. But secondly, we adopted the writings of Leon Trotsky, the great Russian revolutionary. And we understood this wasn't a question of squadist, individual action, it was a question of a united front. And what was impressive in the aftermath of Lewisham is that I went into the SWP headquarters on the Monday morning and the phones never stopped ringing with the message that, well done on Saturday, but I want to have nothing to do with the SWP, but we now need to take the Nazis on big time. So we got the call from a paper merchant in East London who said to us, if you organise a broad mass campaign, I will provide all the newsprint you need between now and the general election. As a result, we could distribute 5 million, 6 million, who knows, those number of leaflets. And we could launch the Anti-Nazi League. Remember, sorry, I don't want to go on too long, but remember that the Labour Party was utterly split at the time. Michael Foot, to his eternal shame, denounced us as the Red Fascists. Other people said there is no, in the Labour Party, trade union leaders said there is no difference between the boot boys of the SWP and the boot boys of the Nazis. But that wasn't the full picture. There were many people in the Labour Party, in the trade union movement, who were in great admiration about what we collectively had managed to achieve. And as a result of that, we could launch the Anti-Nazi League. But I do want to emphasise, I really want to emphasise that the launching of the Anti-Nazi League came out of our revolutionary tradition. It came out of our revolutionary tradition, and it meant that the SWP branches, the SWP organisation, was in a position to reach out and to talk to millions of people in opposing the Nazis in whatever way they wanted. And that is the other lesson of Lewisham. Not only was it a historic victory in the tradition of Cable Street, but it also shaped how the Nazis need to be fought. And you only have to think of the difference between Britain today and France today to see how right and effective that policy was.
Carol's going to speak for about 5 minutes.
5?
Yes.
Okay, well, sorry I'm late, comrades, but I got let out. There's a joke there, actually, because about 40 years ago, as Lewisham started, on the eve of Lewisham, I was grounded. My mum wouldn't let me out. She knew what was coming. Everybody in Deptford knew what was coming. In fact, the whole country knew. But in particular, as a skinny 13-year-old kid living there in the area, everybody at school knew. In fact, the day before, the Friday before, I will never ever forget the atmosphere at school. So I was at school, like I said, in Deptford, South East London Boys' School. It was right in the middle of it. The annex building overlooks Clifton Rise. And the Friday before, I can only describe it. The word that comes back is one which has been used in recent weeks, actually, over Grenfell, and that is rage. The black kids were absolutely incensed. There was fear, without doubt, when it comes to the NF, but there was absolutely rage and hatred that they should ever dare to march through Clifton Rise. And the talk was, right, we're going to stop them. I mean, sometimes with memories like this, you can think, well, you're just adding things, or you're just projecting things. This certainly wasn't the case. It's one of the clearest political memories I've had on the day. Outside the outside the music classroom, right? And they listed the arms which they were going to bring with them: bricks, pieces of wood, chains, nunchuckers. And if you don't know what nunchuckers are, go and get out a Bruce Lee DVD. You know, you'll soon find out. They were going equipped. The other memory, which is absolutely clear from 40 years ago, is outside the school gate there was a lone young white woman dressed in a duffel coat. At the time I thought she was like a student teacher, and she was leafleting the school. Now in our school you could tell, as school kids can, you could tell, if not the lefty teachers, but certainly the progressive teachers from the not so progressive teachers. And the sight of that sole young white woman leafleting against the Nazis, I wouldn't say it's split opinion, but it certainly weeded out the ones that were on our side to the ones that thought, as Paul inferenced, that, and she said, well, the people against the Nazis are just as bad as the Nazis. So anyway, the battle was set. I was confined to quarters. I even remember when my mum came back home, she said, and this is the fear side, you know, this is being genuine. She said when the train pulled in, a friend of hers, black woman on the train, pulled in at New Cross Gate, and she took one look around her, and the carriage was full of white people, and she just freaked out. She said, I've got to get off, I've got to get off. She got off the train. Such was the heat, the atmosphere at the time. Now, little did I know at the time, that lone white woman handing out leaflets outside the school gate, that was part of other things that were happening wider. And it's only, obviously, years later that I've since been told and become aware that there were others involved, others who I'm now friends and comrades with. Andy Struthers, now, for people out here, people who don't know, Andy's a talker, just in case you didn't know. He is a talker. In fact, I've often said, he's probably the nearest we've got to Danny DeVito. The guy can talk. And what actually happened on the evening of that Friday was Andy, along with Phil Marfleet and a couple of others, they took it upon themselves, went around the area and telling groups of youths, look, the front are going to try and march tomorrow, and we're going to stop them. You know, there's going to be a terror, and the police are going to get it as well. And so the story goes, because, you know, sometimes these stories can get a little bit embellished, but this is one I'd like to believe. And so one of the reactions was, Andy's trying to, you know, get the local youth on side, comes across a group of black guys, a group of black kids, and they turn around to him and say, you're going to stop the front. You white boys are going to get a pasting. That was the reaction. And as it happens, the following day, same group of black kids did turn up and they got stuck in. You know, they really went for it. And when you see the pictures, when you see the TV archive of the black kids climbing over the rails to get at the front, you know, you knew that that promise that was made when I was at school, they actually fulfilled it. You know, the master race got a hammering, you know. It's also important to note that it wasn't an automatic transition, because at the time, although me and a lot of other black kids knew that the NF, you know, were the enemy, a persistent problem was the police. It was terrible. Sus laws, stop and search, you know, you get hauled over, turn out your pockets. If you had a car, you know, you get pulled over, right, come to the police station, 2 days' time, produce your producer. It happened to my brother. You go into the police station, you then volunteer your producer, and then you get hammered with something else. And in fact, on the occasion when my brother went to Deptford police station, on his way in, coming out was a black guy with his son, and he was warned. He said, look, don't get stitched up. And that's exactly what happened. So the actual experience of the police was foremost with a lot of black youth at the time. But the thing that changed it, the thing that changed it was the Lewisham 21 defence campaign, when the NF attacked that march, and they attacked it. They threw acid on one girl, they broke the arm of another girl, and after that there was no turning back. I've been told to wind up, so what I will say is, in terms of the aftermath, Darcus Howe put it brilliantly during Dave Widgery's memorial, which, you know, we had in 2002. And Darcus said he'd fathered 5 kids in this country, and the first 4 grew up angry, rebellious, always, you know, fighting something. And his last child grew up black at ease. And that sums it up perfectly. That's not to say that the racism went away, but the Nazis, their ability to march unchallenged, with their flags and their spears, and all that grotesque hatred, that was pushed to the back. The very fact that, there were a series of firebombings and racial attacks, that in some respects points to their weakness in a strange sort of way. Because they couldn't command the streets, they veered in another direction, which was repulsive. I remember the New Cross fire. The day after, there was 2 collections in the school, which was right behind the house itself. So it's definitely felt. But with regards to the Nazis on the street, it's without doubt that the London which people experience today and probably take for granted, the turning point was Lewisham. When I tell kids now, do you realise they're trying to march through here, they look at me and say, as though to say, why are you still telling lies at your age? They don't believe it, but it actually happened, And I know we're celebrating the centenary of the Bolshevik Revolution. The Bolsheviks, it was anti-Semitism. For us, it was anti-black. We killed the rats, comrades, and that's clean the sewers.
I was part of the punky reggae rebellion that took place in 77, and the reason why was, I want to talk about before 77 actually. I want to talk about the atmosphere of terror. And I start off with cricket actually. What could be more brilliant than cricket? I'll tell you why it was first. My father took me to see the West Indies beat Australia the year before as a kid, and there was a war taking place when you went to see the cricket match. You'd been attacked, National Front opening up there. Eggbaston was a hell. Do you mean all these things were happening? You couldn't walk the street without seeing NF put everywhere. And I think that there was a guy called Tony Gregg, who was the captain of the England cricket team, and he said, "I'm going to make the West Indies grovel." And you have to understand that it was part of the atmosphere of what was going on in terms of, and every one of us had been attacked or in some ways. I still have the scar of being hit on the head and said, if they're black, send them back. If they're brown, kick them down. If they're red, shoot them dead. And I remember thinking there are no Native Americans in the UK. That might be beaten up for in West Ham Lane about this stuff. But actually, what it meant was, from childhood was over. The idea you could just walk down the street without looking about where you were going, right, was a quick way for a short life. Do you mean? And the idea of calling the police. The police used to come along, and the police used to wear this. If the police came along, they were wearing this. They used to wear these gollywog badges, which, because Johnson's were doing a collection, he's claiming it was for charity, but actually meant they were in the National Front. Yeah. And if they came in the National Front, you were going to get a third beating from those people that turned up. So the idea, I remember our parents were very religious. That's the reason why we were always kept in. They said, turn the other cheek, but you ran out of cheeks. Do you mean all 4 of them were kicked? Do you mean if you decided that you didn't want to fight, and you were acquainted with this understanding very, very early on about the nature of the state? The state isn't neutral. They didn't listen to you and say you were being attacked and whatever it is. They turned around and they took sides. So up to 77, you actually felt a sense of defeat. You actually felt that there was nowhere for you to go. And actually, I was at Wood Green. Right? And I remember pouring out of the station. We had fireworks as well. We came up with fireworks, put these fireworks in these things and fired them into the Nazis. And the reason why we did it was because, if every day you feel that you're not going to, you're going to be treated in this way, you become part of the tip of the spear. But that wouldn't have happened, I don't think, without political direction and understanding about what you were trying to do. I got leaflets outside my school kids, of that, saying why you should come to East London. There has to be subjective political organisation as well. You didn't feel it in terms of a clear way of trying to do it, but you felt that there's some sense where you had to come together in trying to do that. And that's part of the reason why I think that when we talk about working class organisation, it was also possible for that to come together. I grew up in a Jewish area where people understood Cable Street and said you're right to do it, you have to fight, you have to change things. In other words, there's a melding of all those traditions, and actually that's what the party carries. It carries I know we stand up here as whatever, but I feel now more than ever, I went to the acid attacks that took place, acid demonstrations that took place in Stratford, and I think we have to have that spirit where we're going to resist. And also the political complications are there. There's always a safe demonstration and a demonstration that confronts, and the combination between the two, and that's what I found out in UAF. People are first afraid. It's not true they automatically want to fight, actually, to be honest, because the truth is, anybody who's been chased by a skinhead, I was a very fast runner, and all my training took place on the street, yeah? Anybody who tells you, yeah, I stood up, yeah, I was going to do that. No, you ran. If you didn't run, you weren't going to live, right? But when you got the chance, you know what it's like running away from someone, and then you get the chance to give them a kicking. The joy that you feel, like, I've had enough. No, you haven't, you can have some more, right? The reason why you feel that is because of oppression, rage. And actually, Lenin said this. He said, when you become a revolutionary, it's not about fighting just about the question of exploitation or austerity. It's when you stand up for other people and you fight that you begin to change things and you begin to transform them. And actually, to be honest, that's, you know, there was a big sign outside near our school where someone put socialist worker after 1977. The National Front put lazy socialist worker afterwards, and there was a battle that was painted out, crossed over and over and over again as people fought for the battle. What you felt for, people were fighting for the tradition about which way we were going to go. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember. At the heart of the anti-fascist fight has also been a socialist vision of what type of society goes, and it goes all the way back to trying to change our society. It inspired me. That's why I'm standing here, to be honest. I don't think I'd be standing here if it wasn't for things like Lewisham. And I don't mean standing here just as a person, I mean standing here as a political, rounded individual that has a sense of how you can lead. I'm not the only one. I was 12 when that was going on. I think this country is full of working class kids who feel the same way, but even more angrier than they were before. And we have to fight for tradition, because the Islamophobia is filthy, and the people that are coming out of the sewer now are just as dangerous as they were then. And we defeated them then, and we're going to have to defeat them again in the future.
Right, I think Danny DeVito did actually support Corbyn, didn't he? Very certain of that. Yeah. Now, I mean, have to be clear that Lewisham was a mass event, absolutely. You know, I mustn't get carried away with any idea that it was anything else. But also, you know, Trotsky was in favour of mass revolution, mass events, but he was also in favour of attention to detail, of tactics as well. And I mean, you know, Harold is right. What exactly was said that night before, but we did go around visiting black kids on the street, and we spent a lot of the evening talking to kids about what was going to happen the next day, and a lot of them were quite suspicious of us. I don't think we didn't look like hard street fighting men and women to them. The other thing is that the National Front, the Nazi Front, when they used to go marching, had those rather nasty spears at the front, and whatever the role of the umbrella, and I did have that umbrella, we paid detail to organisation, because I'd been spending weeks reading Clausewitz on strategy and tactics in war, and I'd been reading Trotsky, and I learned a couple of things. One was you always went for the soft underbelly of the enemy, and two, in the First World War, they used to have stewards at the back to make sure that people ran the right way. Nobody could retreat, you went forward. You know, there's an old saying in Russia in the Second World War, it took a brave man to desert the Russian army. So we knew that there was a massive crowd. I mean, the determination of the crowd was amazing. I remember horses trying to break up the masses of the crowd, and I remember one of the coppers collecting a brick in the side of his face. And personally, I don't remember the horses after that. But East London, we were organised together, and our aim was to get the soft underbelly. We weren't going to go for the spears, let somebody else have those. We were going to go for the shopkeepers and petty bourgeoisie waddling down behind them. And East London, we were well organised. It wasn't just about the umbrella. We had stewards in front to make sure that people couldn't lead the charge too early, because people were actually itching to go for them. So really, I used the umbrella to count the beats of making sure that the honour guard was ahead. And we didn't release the stewards until the honour guard was passed. And when the honour guard was passed, the stewards fell away and everybody ran into the road. And as Pete Alexander said to me the other day, he'd never seen so many people turning green all at once. The Nazis, the rank and file, absolutely fled and panicked. And what I couldn't help noticing was, I don't know who these people were, but other people just rushed in and started having to go at the honour guard as well, who were trying to get back to the rank and file to protect them. And I remember one young guy grabbing a spear off of a Nazi, and he was chasing him around the road. So, you know, the front were quite clearly broken up there, and the crowd made short work of them. And unfortunately, the police then turned on the crowd, and terrible incidents like John Lockwood happened, which was really awful, and a lot of people were badly beaten up. But there is no doubt it was a turning point in forcing the Nazis back and beginning to build the Anti-Nazi League.
Thank you, Andy. Sheila, and then
Yeah, I'm Sheila from Lewisham, and I was there organising beforehand. And rather than having my personal reminiscence of the day, which was the most useless thing I ever did, like going around in a car dropping off balloons filled with red ink and rotten fruit, where obviously up the road people were using bricks, but there we go. The important thing I wanted to say was what would have happened if we hadn't done it. Because I was in Lewisham, I lived in Bromley, I was in Lewisham Socialist Workers' Party for a long time before that. Every Saturday was brown trousers Saturday. You didn't go for half a dozen people at a paper sale. We had to build up to 20 or 30 people to have the confidence to do a paper sale in Lewisham near the market. You'd be there, a whole mixture, young and old, men and women, etc. You know, the normal range that you'd expect to have. And then you'd be standing and you'd see a whole phalanx of National Front coming on the other side of the road, all male, all big, all jacketed, helmets, baseball bats, and they were coming for you. So you can imagine what confidence we needed to be able to continue, because if we'd been beaten off the streets by then, if you couldn't go out and organise politically, if you couldn't go out on strike without being physically attacked and beaten off the street by the Nazis, then we wouldn't be the country that we are today. So it was absolutely vital that we defended the streets and our right to organise. We needed a bit of help. East London particularly was quite helpful, because it got to the stage where, you know, can we carry on doing this? And we were assured, we had to take it on faith, that this following Saturday there will be a number of East London comrades around the market by the stalls, and they would be there. Trust me, you won't see them, but they'll be there, and if there's any trouble they'll come out and help protect you. And we took that on faith, because we weren't individuals, we were part of an organisation. We couldn't rely on Al-Qaraf and local Labour Party people to do that for us. We needed the party organisation, anti-fascist organisation, to give us the confidence to stand up to them. So that's the key thing I wanted to say. And also, the difference between that feeling and the feeling afterwards. I remember going selling Socialist Worker the week after the demonstration, and we were going from pub to pub in Lewisham, very welcome, people loving to see us. And then we were standing there, we suddenly saw all these guys coming down the road waving Union Jacks. And, here we go. We're going to be pasted. There was only 2 or 3 of us together. And they said, don't worry, love, we're Millwall.
Yeah, Balavindarana from Ealing Branch. After we had beaten the National Front and when they were packed off to the railway station, the police had taken them away, we all marched into the centre of Lewisham. And funnily enough, there were no police there at all, and we took over the whole of the Lewisham centre. And in fact, we were even trying to organise the traffic, because there was no one else there. But soon after, and the police marched in all directions. And then they sort of started attacking us, and they started forcing us into all the side streets. And that's another real battle took place then with the police. And I can remember we were jumping over the garden fences, picking up anything we could find, bricks, etc., and fighting back with the police. And also from the windows upstairs, I can remember some black old ladies throwing cauliflowers or whatever they could get at the police, even buckets of water they were throwing at the police. And that's when a couple of the police motorcycles were set on fire. And that battle took place for quite a while. And the police were given quite a big hiding there as well. Just want to add one more thing, that up to that point, Lewisham, the National Front had tried to some extent, they had tried to use the divide and rule policies. They say that they've got nothing against the blacks because they're Christians, they have the same culture as us, they speak English. It's the Asians, against. If you remember, all the race murders that took place up to then were all the Asians. And also all the marches the National Front held were all in the Asian areas. And I can also remember arguing with some black people in those days, saying, especially when we were marching against the National Front, they'd be in the pubs, there were some black people together in the pubs, And I'll go up to say, "What, you can't join us?" They say, "No, nothing with us, they're only against you because you people eat smelly food or dress funnily, etc." But this march was against, if you remember, against the muggers. And this is the first time, a lot of black people came out, and they sort of learned that the common enemy is the National Front, and they're against us, all of us, whether we're black, Asian, whoever. And that really cemented the unity, and in fact it gave the Asian people a lot of courage when they saw now the black people also coming out in large numbers, they fight against the National Front, and that's our common enemy. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Phil Turner. I was arrested on the day of the demonstration, and I mean, it was a tremendous victory. I mean, the hammering the Nazis took that day. I mean, I'm not a street fighter, as you can probably see, but everybody, could pile in on that day, and we gave them a real good idea. And I was arrested and then in a single cell for the rest of the day, and gradually more and more people were pushed into these single cells, probably 20 or 30, and we were getting updates of what was happening. In fact, we heard that the police station had been burned down at one point. I don't know whether that is true or apocryphal, but we were getting updates of what was happening, because of course the police lost it, but then they tried to regain control. But I think it was 300 arrests in the end, and they did try and say come back at us, but really the victory was ours. And the story that John tells about the Communist Party role and the two marches, it's very similar. A year before in Rotherham, the NF had marched during a by-election, and exactly the same thing happened. The Trades Council and the Labour Party marched that way, the Nazis were going that way, and we, as the Socialists at the beginnings of the Anti-Nazi League, were the ones that stood with the local Asian people, because they were trying to march through the Asian area. And that was the crucial difference. First of all, the leadership that revolutionists gave to make the stand, and then secondly, local people, ordinary black people, Asian people started to actually for the first time break through the fear and come out on the streets, and that was really important. And we can see the same lesson today when we talk about the Rotherham 12. It's revolutionaries, part of the UEF, building a united front that gave the lead to say we can stand, whatever the circumstances, we can stand against the Nazis. That gives confidence to others to stand up. But also another factor, I think, is that there was a general radicalisation at the time. And we have to remember that there had been the New Cross fire, which actually, I think radicalised a lot of people. Yeah. There had been Grunwick's only the year before, which was a fantastic, if that had won, that could have turned things the other way, and that helped radicalise people. And I'd been a young journalist at that time. I was a student by the time I was arrested, but in the middle of the 70s, there was, particularly amongst local provincial journalists, there was a growing mood that we didn't want to see the Nazis get the kind of coverage they were getting, and they wanted to challenge that. In turn, that led to the beginnings of the kind of workplace groups we saw, which was journalists against the Nazis. And that's the kind of thing we need to do again today with around stand-up to racism, because it's not about nostalgia. Journalists were on strike and they learned the lessons, and I think other workers now will also learn the lessons. At the time of Corbyn, the hope that is coming through in British politics today, we now have to build that resistance, because there's the lessons are there for us to learn, to bring into the new movement that's going to stop not just the Nazis but build a better world.
Well, I just wanted to talk a bit about the Anti-Nazi League and how our tactics, and with Stand Up to Racism, how our tactics of fighting against fascism and the far right are so absolutely correct, and a bit of a reminiscence about the 90s. In 93, when Derek Beacon was elected, he was the first Nazi councillor to have been elected. He was elected in on the Isle of Dogs, Tower Hamlets, and that night we were campaigning in the area, lots of local people were out, and when he got elected, it was terrifying, and we ran, and lots of people got beaten up, and it was nasty, and they were buoyant, and they were frightening, and I spent most of the time in the Anti-Nazi League running away. It isn't nice. I mean, there are good bits about this meeting where you think, yeah, it's brilliant, and you look at the footage, but nobody gets up in the morning and thinks, I want to go out and fight people on the street, because I'm going to get hurt. But so that was quite a down time when he got, well, it was depressing when he was elected, but the following Sunday, for some reason, we decided we were going to stop their paper sale on Brick Lane, because the British National Party had been selling as a tail end from the National Front since the 1970s at Brick Lane. And this was at a time when there were huge attacks in Brick Lane. Qudus Ali had been almost beaten to death. We thought the far right are getting a real hold in this area and we've got to stop it. So it was quite it was an early demonstration Sunday morning at the top of Brick Lane, and the BNP turned up, John Tyndall, the usual suspects, their councillor Beacon, got out of a van. For some strange reason, there were about 6 cops. And we'd got quite a few people. There were local stall holders that turned up. And we looked across and looked at with Julie Waters and various other people. We looked at them and we thought, there's only 6 coppers. Yeah. That was a brilliant balance of forces. And we had an argument with another organisation that were there, the YRE, because we just passed the word round. We're going to go for them. We're going to run at them. And actually, I'm not brave. I was always terrified. I'm not brave at all. But they were there. They were selling. If we weren't there, they were marching down Brick Lane, attacking people, and you just wanted to get at them. And what we did, we persuaded everyone in the end. It took a bit of persuading to get there, and it was all women at the front, and we did that deliberately. We did it so we didn't look like a big, what we were talking about, the men on one side and the men on the other. It was all women at the front, and we ran across that road. There were other men. There were men behind us, of course. We ran across the road, and it was spectacular because it changed from that mood where the Channel 4 news footage had been of comrades being stamped on the Isle of Dogs when he was elected. So the news footage that night was spectacular of a woman, I won't mention her, in full skirt, a Jewish woman in full skirt, kicking this Nazi who was on the floor, which I just did on replay. And we got them, and we got their papers off them, and we set fire to their newspapers, and they never sold again at the top of Brick Lane.
I'm Vanessa from Manchester, and I mean it's really, really good to hear the reports about the Lewisham, the battle and then. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Manchester and North West and the BNP, because the detail that you provide is really interesting, and it had massive lessons for us when we were fighting the BNP up in the North West, particularly around Nick Griffin being the MEP. When the Nazis decided there were several attacks, but particularly through Oldham, we used all those tactics, but those tactics were over months and months and months of determined tactics of going up to Oldham, to actually being on the streets, pulling huge united front work across the region, really. And I think it's just really good to hear the history and how we continue to learn. It's the lessons that I used up in the Northwest against the BNP that were really... At the time, I didn't have this detailed Lewisham. I didn't realise just the relevance of the lessons. But actually, when you're doing it and you then reflect, you follow it because you know it's right. You're around people you trust. But actually, when you reflect later on, you see how it all fits together. And it has a massive implication for our work now with Stand Up to Racism. Those huge, huge swathes of people who've been, I think, really engaged in politics through Corbyn, through the socialist politics that, we're pushing with that. I think now we have a better time than ever to really use that united front work, to use the vehicle of Stand Up to Racism, to pull and to shape, as we have been doing, to really fight against racism. It can go left or right, we know that. These are the lessons that have worked for us, and I think we have to hold tight with them. You're better than ever now, sorry.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Morgan, and then I'm sorry, just the the man at the back, and I know other people, but we're not going to have time.
At the time of the Battle of Lewisham, I was involved in an occupation of British Steelworks in Greenwich, and 2 of us were sent as a delegation supporting the march against the NF. We had, by the way, a member of the NF in our factory, and we used to have to wear white helmets, and he had a Union Jack printed on his white helmet. I mean, half the workers, about 50, were black. And he was a strange contradiction, a very poor family at Lewisham, and was arguing that all the filth you would get, unemployment was immigration, the same ritual today. But we, in the occupation, which was during the, just in the middle of the march, we had an occupation, and he wasn't able to stay, even though we were supported by the unions, money-wise, etc. The occupation was simply to stop the closure of Lewisham, of St. Nicholas's Hospital at the time. Anyway, he provided us with information about the NF on various occasions when they were going to try to go against us in the occupation by having gangs outside. Anyway, as a delegation we went down, we stayed trapped by the police and went back. But a little bit about previous to that, I was active in the branch, and like Sheila said, at this time the NF were sufficiently strong to have gangs on their sales. And I remember John Edmonds, their leader, would walk up at 11:30 on Saturday mornings to our sale pitch, flying the Union Jack with about 12 of their heavies. And we ended up having to, as Sheila said, call on comrades in the docks, Mickey Finn, Terry Barrett and others, to send members up. So they would send about 12 equally. So we had 2 lines right across the pavement, they photographing us and so on. But we used to have physical battles all the time. But one bit of propaganda that seemed to get, they had a 4-inch drawing, and it pasted all over signposts and bus stops with a picture, a drawing of a face with a turban and just 2 lines. 2 million unemployed, 2 million immigrants. And we used to, systematically go around and tear it up and so on. It's quite clear the rise of fascism, the rise of Nazis is a product of the bloody capitalist system and unemployment. And Paul finally, the final point, Paul referred to compare France with Britain. France, unfortunately, the left did not organise against the rise of the Nazis, and look what they've got now. An extremely powerful political fascist party. Look at Britain. The only thing that saved us was an organised anti-Nazi league and continuing stand up to racism.
Right, now I won't be able to take any questions. Sorry, comrade, I'm only going to give you 2 minutes.
On Saturday, 3rd of June this year, around 1,000 people stopped at most 60 members of the English Defence League marching through Liverpool city centre. The fascists said they were going to march to Derby Square, the city centre. United Against Fascism's, Merseyside United Against Fascism's mobilisation had real social weight behind it. So they were not stopped by individual street fighters. UF's mobilisation had the support of 7 regional trade unions, over 25 local councillors, faith groups, MPs, Show Racism, the Red Card, and many other people. We at first confronted them outside the pub they were meeting in. When the Nazis tried to march, we ended up blocking them at outside Line Street Station, where the march was turned back, and protesters carried on demonstrating against them on the way back to Line Street. I just want to say briefly that it's not always been like that in many parts of the Northwest, including Liverpool. I mean, only 5 years ago, an Irish community march was stopped by a national mobilisation of Nazis. Only 5 years ago again, another Irish community march was confronted by another national mobilisation of Nazis who tried to physically attack it. So we pushed that back by years of consistent United Front mobilisations. Whether that be on the streets with anti-Nazi demonstrations, or whether that be UF's electoral work as well. And I just want to say briefly that there's a discussion in terms of dealing with the emerging Football Lads Alliance. But a few years ago, EDL only had at most 60 in Liverpool. A few years ago, the EDL mobilised thousands. They had a base connected to that is the fascist British National Party's representation electorally in the mainstream. The reason we've pushed that back is because of the United Front strategy. Mass mobilisations on the streets, at the ballot box, that's the tradition we need to carry on.
To come back.
Okay, that's plenty of time. Right. Just 2 points in summing up. First is, in terms of lessons from 77, work by revolutionaries amongst the oppressed. In the run-up to Lewisham and the defence campaign, it didn't happen by accident. We had two quite prominent black comrades who, the work they did, won support from the Lewisham 21 defence campaign. And in fact, the father of one of the kids who was arrested over sus, David Foster, he in fact, he was interviewed and he said, and he put it like this: look, I don't agree with everything the Socialist Workers' Party stands for, but they are the ones that are defending the community. And it's pitched at that sort of level, you know, where people perhaps won't go the full way with all our politics, but they can see we're right there. And today the fault line is Islamophobia. The work that we do now, if you like, we should be doing it anyway, but it pays dividends. And if you don't, the reverse is also true. There's a price to be paid for not doing stuff. So that's the lesson that I take from Lewisham today. And the final point is, it's been a bit of a false start, but we are trying to get, we are in fact putting a documentary film together about Lewisham. So if you know anybody that was there, or you've got stories or material or whatever, please see me after this meeting. Yeah, that's it.
Yes, just a quick story about winning the argument. On the day, the police broke the bones in my hand, and so a couple of days later I was walking around with my arm in a sling. And as I went down to the local pub, the Oxford Arms, I thought to myself, this might be worth a drink or two, you know, arm in a sling. But as I went into the pub, I was astonished to find everyone in the pub had their arm in a sling. And these were people who we'd had furious arguments with for weeks and weeks and weeks about the right to use force, you know, freedom of speech, all of those arguments blown away by the success of the day. Second point, a magical moment, a memory I hold, is late in the day, in the middle of a huge melee with the police, pitching into the middle of this fight, a man in full flight with a cassock flying behind him. This was the vicar of the earlier story, pitching into the battle. Argument won. So it's not just about theoretical argument, it's mainly about practice.
Comrades, I want to thank everybody who has contributed to this meeting. I think it's been extremely instructive, but I think that we only look at the past in order to shape the future. That is the only point of this meeting. We're not resting on our laurels, and God alone knows we face huge challenges in the years to come. There is the huge excitement of the Jeremy Corbyn election campaign, and there is the disgusting crime of Grenfell, engendered by austerity and neoliberalism. And as the great Irish poet says, the centre falls apart, things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. This is what we are witnessing today. We need to draw on the extremely rich experience that we've heard today around the Battle of Lewisham and before that the Battle of Cable Street. We will need to mobilise against the Islamophobia. We will need to deal with the Footballers' Lads Alliance in whatever way we feel is appropriate. But can I make an appeal that what we need in order to deal effectively with that, we need a network of active revolutionary socialists up and down this country. And therefore I think one of the most important lessons coming out of this meeting is the need for socialists to be everywhere in order to mobilise on the scale that we did in Lewisham. Anybody who is not in the Socialist Workers' Party, I would make a humble appeal that you join us today, because, comrades, we don't have indefinite time. We are going into a hugely tumultuous period, and we need to shape it for our side. Otherwise, the people on the other side will take advantage. That's the equation, comrades. Join us today.
About Lewisham, but I think one of the things that we have to understand is that the National Front was the biggest organisation in Europe at the time. When you look at the world now, and you look at the Front National inside France, you look what's going on in Hungary, you look what's going on in Grenfell, I think we're in an extremely polarised situation. And the lessons of Lewisham is about how you build a united front, and the situation is far more serious because the crisis is far more serious, and it's creating those conditions. And I think that what we're looking at the moment is, actually in Lewisham was a victory of two things. It was a victory of brawn, and it was a victory of brains as well. It was a victory of the two combinations, of understanding how to combine them in unique ways when you were confronted by it, but also a reliance on something else. It was the working class itself, a sense that working class people could change things themselves. Somebody didn't go to you and say, you're a 12-year-old kid, wearing shorts and you can't do anything. They said collectively, the numbers are what matters. That's what I remember being drummed into me. The numbers, the amount of you compared to them. It matters that there were 500 National Front. The people that made a big difference actually were the police, because there were 5,000 of them, and they were the ones that defended the Nazis. The state itself turned around and defended the Nazis. So we have to do a combined thing. We have to defeat the Nazis and their arguments. We also have to understand why that state was there, why the police were there. And the police were there to protect the Queen's peace, as it says in their book, and she's got a big peace, right? And the reason why that's important is because we have to understand the dimensions of how racism and class come together and the way to break it. And that's why we do need a socialist party. I want to reinforce that question. We need it for two reasons. One is for morale. The most important thing the Nazis did was give us despair. There's nothing you can do. We're going to break you. We're going to win. We need the politics because we need to have some idea about what's going on. It matters the Muslim community do not feel defeated, and they're going to be isolated by the politics of terrorism, and that matters because that is the way they're going to try and break up the unity around Corbyn and the working class. We matter, and it matters how we struggle, but also what matters is the fact that we understand we can win. Not just about defeating the Nazis, but about breaking a class system that produces the Nazis, that produces them. We have to talk about changing our society in total. Because I don't know about you, but I'm getting older every time, each generation, 10, 12, 20, 30, and each time you see a new set of Nazis come along, I want to fight for a society where Nazis aren't produced, and we have reminiscence about this as a history book. Do you know there were these people that were like that? That's what the type of thing we want to fight for. We want to see the end of fascism, the end of racism, the end of sexism, the end of homophobia. If you want a society like that, then join the Socialist Workers' Party.